Today we're shooting an episode on attribution for lead generation companies. Alan, I want to have you give an introduction about yourself and your experience. You've largely done a lot of the work for our clients for attribution for lead generation companies and ultimately helping them figure out where to best spend their dollars to generate leads. So talk to us a little bit about your experience and your background.
Yeah, so my experience at Three Ventures is obviously the president, principal consultant here. So I am involved in helping our clients solve their toughest and largest data problems and data challenges. And most times, in most cases, that comes down to data architecture, data model, and data structure. You could say that those things are largely synonymous, but it has a focus on what we call the 3 Ps: people, process, and platform. So first and foremost, if we look at the people, it's who are using the platforms in your business that you use to run it, and specifically for lead generation businesses. That's usually some type of marketing analytics platform like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. That's usually some type of CRM such as HubSpot or Salesforce. And for larger clients, they might have some type of, like a data warehousing or a centralized place where they sort of standardize and integrate all of their data for reporting, right? So when we look at the people side of it, it's really about who is touching each one of those platforms. That's my experience, is helping clients figure out who's on their teams, who has the skill sets, who doesn't necessarily have the skill sets, and what are the gaps to be able to answer their attribution questions that they have for lead generation. But then also looking at the process with the people hand in hand is along the lines of, okay, when certain types of activities are being undertaken, whether they're marketing or IT, is there pieces built into those processes which are either enabling, maintaining, or monitoring attribution? And then on the platform side, it's also, hey, is the data model or data architecture of the platform set up in a way that mirrors the representation of how your business operates, and also has the ability to have attribution for whether they're contacts or their sales or whatever is the most important piece of information for your business. They're on a similar level, so you can report on those structures. So that at a high level, those are the primary things that I'm working on and driving with clients. And my experience is pretty vast and working from public companies all the way down to some startups in that realm.
One of the big things that I just heard you state in your introduction was correlating the processes of the operation to the needs for attribution, and saying, hey, you want to think about attribution from the time you get in front of a potential customer all the way through the prospecting phase, all the way into the customer phase, and having an understanding to be able to connect the back-end financial operations to where the dollars are spent on the front end to get those prospects. Talk to me about some of the process that you've developed or the things you have clients think about when they first start with you on the journey of trying to get what I've loosely called as full circle attribution.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the textbook example and definition of it, I think, is very misleading. So, if you tried to study this or you tried to, work on this in a sort of like an educational context, they would say, well, you start with the data model and you make sure the data model represents your business and you make sure your platforms have this. And that's a good way to get fired. And the reason why that's a good way to get fired is because business is so dynamic and so fluid, and it evolves
daily,
over time and daily. And it includes turnover and changes in leadership, changes in business strategy, changes in the market. So it's almost nearly impossible to start with what I'll call like this utopic state and trying to, force feed that down everybody's throat. What I have found is sort of the best approach, to answer your question, is you have to start with the people first. Like fundamentally, what is the understanding of the people who are moving the needle at the organization? Is attribution something they're even worried about? Is the wholeness and completeness of records something they're concerned about? Do they know what is the most important data for the business? And the reason why I say you start with the people first is because you have to get buy-in. To fix an attribution problem is largely going to be multiple months, if not, a larger part of into a year. And it just depends on the scale of the organization, the amount of data, the platforms they use, how much data you have to clean up, how many processes do you have to implement, how many teams do you have to coordinate with. I mean, it's the more you add on, the longer the time frame. And so what I have found is when you start with the people first, you get an understanding about what is going to be the path of least resistance and what is going to be the fastest path to value. And what I have found is organizations, especially lead generation organizations, they're in different states of attribution maturity. And so if you talk about a basic state, I'll say a basic state is like, hey, we know where our leads come from. Okay. An intermediate state is going to know, hey, we know where our best customers come from. And then the third state is going to be sort of the advanced state where not only do they know where all their leads come from, not only do they know where all of their best customers come from, but they also know who are their best salespeople, what are their best touch points at each stage in the funnel, what are their best, demand gen campaigns, what are their best, sales funnel conversion campaigns, moving somebody further down the step of the sales funnel. So there's these different states of maturity. And when you start with the people, you get an understanding of, what is the reasonable next step for being able to quickly drive value. So you can't just jump from, everything being in total chaos to trying to go to the advanced ideal end state. You got to incrementally go to the next phases. That's why I start with the people first.
There was a couple of topics that I feel like you mixed in there around beginning, intermediate, and advanced attribution. When it comes to beginning attribution, largely what my understanding is and what I hear from clients is we just want to be able to correlate how much money do we make for the money we spent on a certain platform generating leads. And what I've heard you say throughout your last response was there might be some intermediate phases here where you might say, okay, well, yes, we got 100 leads from one platform and we spent $5 a lead. So, it's $500. And let's say of those 500 leads, only 10 converted to customers. Well, we know from that platform that, we get 10 out of every 500 leads. It's not really good conversion rate, but if you were to put it to how much money you made, then that could start to approach more of the advanced range. Well, now you're starting to say, hey, we know that there's dollars spent on platform. Here's how much it costs us to acquire prospects. How capable are we getting those prospects through the sales process? And then the more advanced stage is also coming into what characteristics of our sales process attribute to get leads from various sources through the sales pipeline faster. That's more the advanced route. Is that correct?
Correct.
What do you see from organizations in terms of awareness or ability to know that they can do these things at their organization?
It depends on how long leadership has been there. It depends on how long what I'll call their A players have been there. If they've experienced a lot of turnover recently, usually it's going to be significantly lower. If they've had a good amount of tenure at the business and they have had consistent leadership, usually it's a little bit higher. But what I actually find is that attribution is not just having the correct data. It's also a methodology and a way of using analytics to run your business operations. Now, business operations, that could be marketing, that could be sales, that could be finance, etc. But fundamentally speaking, first you need the data to understand what's going on. And then the advanced stages are, now that we have the data and we've interpreted what's going on, what are we supposed to do with what we have learned? And so I have had public entities that I've worked with that are in the beginning phases. I have had startups that are in the advanced phases. I've had vice versa. Mm-hmm. It varies case by case, but I will usually look at what is the level of maturity with their people, processes, and platforms, like we've covered off on earlier, because attribution is not the same for every type of lead generation business. It is, do you have the data that is structured in a way which allows you to make sense of and understand what's driving your business? And then the second piece is, do you have processes and reporting in place that helps you ensure that you are incorporating those trends and findings into your business operations, right? So those two go hand in hand, and you have to start with the correct data before you can start with the integration in your operations. Hopefully that answers your question.
It did. And I think there's common think around attribution in the lingo that I've described at the beginning part of this episode, which was how do you just attribute dollar spent to dollar earned? But attribution could also be how do you attribute how quickly you got somebody from the first stage in the sales funnel to the next stage, to the next stage, to the next stage. Attribution is really just around correlating how did you get from one place to the other.
Correct. And it's looking at your business holistically. Because if a marketer says attribution, usually what they mean is like traffic sources. Hey, we had all this traffic come to our website. What traffic channels did it come from? If you're talking to maybe like a sales manager, they're going to want to know where did a lead come from, right? If you're talking to somebody who's in sales operations or maybe even like an optimization role, they're going to want to know what was responsible for moving a deal from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead. And then if you are maybe at the executive level, you're going to want to know of our leads that became customers, where did they come from?
Yes.
So this really runs the gamut of what the roles and responsibilities are that you want to,
Attribution is everyone's problems.
Yeah, attribution is everyone's problem, but it's understanding what the scope is for each person. And, right now there's a lot of hype with the whole generative AI piece, saying that, we could just feed our data into Gen AI and it can spit us out a bunch of information. Well, I have two problems with that I've seen. Fundamentally, all the Gen AI projects that we've done, they are all chopped off at the knees due to poor data quality or poor data process.
Yes, they have just straight been hacked. And it's been shocking how universal that's been.
Yeah, across almost every company we've worked with doing a Gen AI project. Some of the biggest corporations in the world that you've heard of, all the way down to some startups. The challenge that they're having is they don't understand that technical debt and data debt are prerequisites to being able to use Gen AI. And so the thought process is, we're just going to have a platform and we're just going to have
I want to clarify here. There's using Gen AI, but then there's also using your data to train the Gen AI, and that's what you're talking about.
Correct. Or to ask the Gen AI a question about your data.
Right.
Like, hey,
that's the structured part.
What drives our leads in the last year to transfer from this stage in our sales funnel to the next stage? Well, the reality is, if you don't have A, the data structure, B, consistent data, and C, accurate data, you're not going to have any ability for the Gen AI to give you any type of insight as to what is happening. Now, where we have really excelled at 3 Ventures is being able to take it beyond just what's happening, but what are you supposed to do about it? And so now when we look at attribution, solving it for lead generation companies, there's different dimensions of attribution that we like to talk about. We have the marketing piece. We have the sales dimension. So I should use it correctly and go. We have the marketing dimension, we have the sales dimension, and we have the business operations dimension. And when you look at that, fundamentally, your platforms that you use as a business, the data model has to incorporate all of the attribution needs for each of those dimensions. And you're usually going to have a marketing funnel, you're going to have a sales funnel, and then you're going to have like the KPIs of the business. Mm-hmm. And what is going to happen is usually sales, marketing, and the executive teams are going to own each one of those.
Yeah.
And the executive needs are going to be different from marketing and sales. But fundamentally speaking, the issue that I've had is the executives don't understand the amount of work that's needed to get them to the level of reporting that they want to see.
Yes.
And they also don't have the patience to do the job correctly, because to get them the reporting that they want to see, you have to have the marketing dimension solved and you have to have the sales dimension solved, because the executive piece or the business operations are really built on top of those two.
I really wish that. Do you have something you want to add on to that?
No, continue.
I really wish that from an executive context, organizations would understand that dashboards and reporting are the last piece of the puzzle right? They're the icing on the cake. They're the finishing touch. They're the plate before it's about to get served to you.
But it's the first thing you start with when you think about requirements.
Right. Because you want to say, what do I need to have when this is all done? And then you work your way backwards from how do I get from what I want to where I am. Right. And then that's the path to get to where you want.
Correct. And the biggest lack of understanding that I see at the executive level is if you have the data in whichever platforms you're using, if you just use a CRM and you just report out of that, that's totally fine. But if you ingest the data into like an own data warehouse or something along those sorts where you have a standardized schema that brings in all your data, totally fine. It depends on what level of maturity you're at. But what I see with executives is they don't understand that if they don't start with the reporting requirements that they want these platforms or these systems to produce, they will fundamentally fail.
Yes.
Because it won't produce the insight or the trend analysis that the executive team wants to see. And then if the executive team does not outline well what they want to see, that cannot be translated into a data model or a data architecture, because for anything to happen in any off-the-shelf or open source platform, you have to be able to think critically about your business. How does it operate? What are the key drivers of it? What do I need to know? And usually how we work through this is we lead a workshop with executives. We go through
discovery.
You could call it discovery, but we call it a questions to be answered workshop.
Yeah.
And we get to interview them all individually one-on-one, and then we bring them back together as a group. And we said, hey, here's what we heard all of you guys say. Here's where there's congruency. Here's where there's divergence. And then we get them to agree upon that. And when we have their agreements, then we start to assess and look at the data models and the data structures of the platforms that they're using to run their organization. And that's when we start to make the decisions about, okay, from an attribution perspective on the marketing, sales, and business operations sides, what is missing? Is the data model that's needed to answer those questions, is it representative in these platforms? Do we, from a business intelligence perspective, knowing the technical data types and categories of data that we're going to need to answer all those questions, do those also exist in those platforms in a way which would allow us to build that type of reporting? And that's where I see the biggest miss is they just hand off the CRM platform to sales, or they hand it off to
sales or marketing. That's usually what it always happens.
Correct. And then the sales and the marketing teams, sometimes they'll bring us in because they go, hey, we can't explain to our executives what's going on. And as a consultant, it's extremely challenging because we know how to fix it. We know how to solve it. But we're usually brought in as the last resort.
We're a liaison.
And when I say something along the lines of, it's going to take us, 4 to 5 months to fix this, and it's going to take X amount of thousands of dollars, what I'll usually get as pushback is, well, marketing and sales told me they were going to do this last time, and now you're telling me we got to spend all this more money? And it's really hard for me to say, well, hello, Mr. Executive. Right or wrong, you weren't involved on this project. And because you weren't involved in this project, it basically means you have to, to a degree, redo it.
You can't be hands off. Excuse me. You can't be hands off with your company's operations and the key software you use to run your organization.
No, executives need to be...
expect it to work how you want it to work.
Correct.
That is a fallacy of operation. And if you want to use technology to run your business, you better be all in on the implementation of that technology to make sure that it's implemented correctly.
100%. So now this is why I'm usually brought in to help out with larger attribution projects, is because there is marketing and IT maybe spinning around in circles, or sales spinning around in circles, and they haven't been able to get the clear direction or understanding from the executive team. They probably haven't had the experience like we have in the definitions to it. What processes are we supposed to follow? Who are we supposed to interview? How's this supposed to be managed over time? How is it supposed to be documented? And then paired with the data architecture knowledge to go, okay, here's everything that I heard you guys saying. Here's how it has to be pieced and nuanced together to show you this. One of my favorite projects that we did was We were brought in at a health. I don't know if they were a healthcare organization, but they were in.
They're a lead generation company who has really an e-commerce presence, and they sell supplements to individuals and entities.
Yeah, wholesale professional grade supplements, and then they had like an online telehealth platform, and they also
that you
had
could
like
buy as an individual,
online white labeled sort of drop shipping store for certain types of healthcare practitioners, and heavily lead generation based, and really helped them solve this across their entire business. And for the first time, was able to provide them with context and reporting to their executive team on what was working and what wasn't working. And that's because I was brought in as sort of the peer to the executives. And then also I've been in the shoes of the marketers, the IT people. I've been in the shoes of the sales people. I understand what their needs are and, how to help them tweak and adjust some of their processes slowly over time instead of doing any major big changes. Because commonly what I'll find is it's not like a total disaster in any one department. It's like a handful of things in each department.
Yes.
And those handful of things in each department, when you sum them up, the total is really, really great to the executive team. And once you solve a need for the executive team, you then start to get the checks, you then start to get the approvals to go and to help them get away from what's happening to what are we supposed to be doing about it.
And that's where strategic leadership, I really feel like, is the missing ingredient in a lot of these organizations that we work with. Is, to your point, how do you look at your organization, who's in charge of each of these processes, and is the organization, do they really have a revenue operations strategy set up and in place where you have sales and marketing and customer service or customer success working together under one roof where everybody's job is to generate revenue?
100% correct. And so as we think about attribution here at 3 Ventures and doing it for clients, that's really how we're approaching it, and that's really how we're solving it. So that specific client, it led to them getting acquired. That was a pretty big deal. Basically, as I understand it, was one of the sort of like large conditions to being able to get purchased was having this solved and understood. And we were able to solve this, help them understand from their Adobe Experience Cloud, their data warehouse, HubSpot, and Google Ads and Facebook Ads. We were able to implement sort of a full circle attribution solution for them that was really well understood with their business. And then we were able to take their emails, take their paid search, take their paid social, and those activities, and help them understand what depth they had into their sales funnel and where their best customers were really coming from.
Yes.
And they had a very bifurcated B2B and B2C side of their business. And we had the ability to segment that for them and see the attribution into both the marketing and sales funnels accordingly. And while doing that, then we were able to help with all of their lead scoring, with their revenue operations, with their sales ops. I was working very closely with their head of sales, implementing processes there, doing a lot more automated work on their deal creation inside of HubSpot and the prioritization of deals, because they had so many deals for their sales teams to work on. It wasn't just lead scoring, and it wasn't just making sure that inactive deals or deals that had gone cold sort of got reassigned. It was also making sure that the sales teams had the top priorities at the top of what they were supposed to be working on. And that had made a really big impact on their ability to be closing on both sides of their sales funnel, on the B2B side and the B2C side. It was very rewarding to help them do that. Obviously, it led to them getting acquired. And that's probably one of my favorite experiences to date.
Yep. How would you help organizations get their marketing and their sales teams in alignment between KPIs that correlate to positive traction to the bottom of the sales funnel?
The handshake is what I call it. So sales wants good qualified leads, right? Marketing wants to know, what is a good qualified lead? That's the handshake. So solving that specifically for any given company is one of the best ways to start and to better build and mend that relationship between sales and marketing is because once we can have marketing think about the setting up and structuring their campaigns and their activities in a way where that information can now feed down into the sales pipeline. And then there is a couple key pieces of data associated with every contact or every deal or every opportunity if you're in Salesforce. And the sales team can start to do some rough lead scoring based off of that and see where the best deals or best opportunities are coming from. Once there is a basic and fundamental understanding to that, that's when I start to see sales and marketing teams begin to work significantly better together, because there is an inability from sales to solve the data structure problems. And then there's an inability from marketing to understand the data structure needs. And so they both come together at this point where they both can't solve. And that is where the handshake needs to fundamentally happen.
And that's where working with somebody who's a platform solutions architect who can get in and learn your business, knows the platform you're operating with, can help you unearth where you're having shortcomings in that process. You know, I saw the funniest meme today. It was Homer Simpson, and he had all his skin pulled back with like a little clip on like 3 or 4 points in his back. And on the front, it was just like writing of marketing KPIs, like, you know, increased MQLs 300%, you know, average traffic on site up 400%. And then on the back, it was like what all the operations care about. And it was, you know, 50% reduction in close rate and their customer lifetime value went down, but the marketing numbers went up, but, you know, the sales numbers went down. And so having a correlation between marketing and sales and saying, hey, what's getting people from the top to the end of the funnel? And even if the marketing numbers get skewed in a direction where it might not look like they're as good, what it should really come down to is, what are the ending numbers correlating to revenue at the bottom of your funnel?
Yep.
If you get more money in the door, who cares if you have half the MQLs? If your deal size is triple, I'd say you're doing a better job.
Yeah, and my experience is, you know, marketing is usually responsible for certain KPIs, like an MQL, marketing qualified lead, or an SQL, sales qualified lead, right?
Or
that's sort of where the handshake, starts to hand off is somewhere between.
It's
those
an
two.
SAL. It's a sales accepted lead,
right? Yeah. And usually SAL is between those two. So when I look at this, and in my experience, usually sales is responsible for certain KPIs, marketing is responsible for the KPIs that come before that, and no one is responsible for where those KPIs bridge together. And so
this is where the attribution comes into play.
This is where the attribution comes into play. You know, I very much love a good problem. A good problem to solve with clients is usually one that's got some politics to it. In my mind, where, you know, sales and marketing are feuding, and there's maybe some stuff, you know, water under the bridge.
Smartest marketing person versus the smartest salesperson. Yeah.
And also, you know, having to mend that relationship, but then also having the insight to show them what's actually working. I really enjoy getting to be that facilitator. And usually if I can have a leader in marketing and a leader in sales, and I can come together on a pilot and help them understand what's going on as that missing piece, that's where I've been able to have a significant amount of success doing the attribution work. And what I really enjoy about this is it removes some of that friction between marketing and sales or marketing and IT. And that fundamentally is where the breakthroughs start to happen.
That is where a lot of the progress is made. It's almost like you're an attribution analyzer, right? You're saying, hey, there's all these places we could have attribution for marketing, for sales, for organization wide, from the time we get in front of a customer to the time they pay us money. Which pieces of the attribution puzzle is creating, which links create the best attribution chain, right? Because you can say, hey, just because we're getting volume doesn't mean we're getting revenue. And so you can start to correlate attributes in a couple of different areas and say, when you put these 3 parts of attribution together, that's when we see the most revenue align.
Right. And marketing, I believe, is always out there trying to find something new, do the next thing, find the next, you know, sort of gold mine from an advertising perspective.
Right.
And what I argue is sales is responsible for the bottom line sales numbers, the SQLs, the customers in closing, in negotiation.
Closing, always be closing.
Marketing is responsible for, contacts, leads, marketing qualified leads, et cetera. Basically, everything prior to the handoff. But what I also argue that they are both responsible for is they are both responsible for questioning the other. And this is where I commonly find this activity does not happen. Marketing is supposed to be asking sales, hey, what is moving best and furthest down the funnel? Okay. It depends on how much lead volume you have. It depends on how much deal volume you have or opportunity volume if you're in Salesforce. But if you have a small team, small volume, you should be facilitating these conversations on an every week or 2 week basis.
Yeah, a weekly check-in or twice monthly check-in.
Right.
Yeah.
And you should be asking the question, what is getting the deepest in the sales funnel? And be focused on what's getting deepest in the sales funnel. And the only real question and follow-up that you should be considering there is if a marketing activity you're doing is not getting deep into the sales funnel, you should ask yourself, have they been there for a long enough period of time? So what is the average amount of time it takes to get to a certain depth in the sales funnel? And then for this new marketing activity or new campaign that you've been running, has enough time gone by to make an assessment and to make a decision with. Because marketing, in my mind, is supposed to be responsible for asking these questions. And they should start to understand and interpret that when they test out these marketing campaigns, there's a certain window of time that has to go by before you can make an assessment. On the contrary, with sales is supposed to be doing the same thing, but reporting up to marketing. Hey, we've generally been seeing some trends like leads have been getting soft or opportunities have been getting soft, or, hey, maybe it seems like people like they're still contacting us, but they're not as motivated. Has anything changed? Sales is responsible for bringing that qualitative feedback from actually having conversations with reps to the marketing team, where marketing is supposed to be quantitative in their tests and asking questions of, hey, what's working, what's not working, and has enough time gone by for us to make a decision. And that's really where I see there being a huge issue with understanding the process of how marketing is supposed to work and how sales is supposed to work.
And God, to just put more cadence to what you're saying, I can't, there's a couple projects we have right now. Sales and marketing, that handoff is just so disconnected, where we try to coach teams and say, hey, you guys, just because you have an MQL doesn't mean that MQL is ready to be, just because you have a lead doesn't mean that lead's an MQL, right? Because an MQL is when we want to say, hey, we've qualified this person to be sent to sales. And a lot of times I've been hearing bad guidance from sales teams where they're just saying hey, we need more volume. And so marketing solution is open up the pool of leads, send more lead to sales, but then sales is going to kick back and say, you guys, half these are junk and they're just not qualified. They're having that relationship where you flip your organization from these departments where you're the marketing department, you're the sales department, you're the operations team, back-end operations, whatever you want to call it. Flipping the script and saying, y'all are one team and everybody's responsible for revenue. That's revenue operations. I think changing the tone and the understanding for how these departments are supposed to be viewed is going to help in the long run for organizations who want to become more end of the sales funnel centric.
Right, because if you're head of sales, you're only going to be as good as the people you manage and how good you guys are at reaching your goals. Well, how are you going to reach your goals? Well, you either get more volume or you get better quality. Either way, you have to go and have a good relationship with whoever that head of marketing is or whoever that director of marketing is. And so if those two roles are not conversing, collaborating, having a good relationship, that's where I come in. I am the sales and marketing relationship facilitator. And it just also happens that I happen to be very good at this role because I come from a data science, data architecture background. And I've also ran...
You come from a MarTech background, right, with training and education in data.
Yeah, fundamentally speaking. And all my professional experience has largely been in either operational or marketing or sales data.
Yep.
Fundamentally. So
12 plus years.
That's at 3 Ventures.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I've enjoyed doing, and that's why we've been able to find a lot of success. And so, if we have anybody out there who's listening to this, who's interested in it, you can definitely feel free to reach out. If you'd like, you can contact me personally if you want to, Alan Morte, that's AlanMorte, or you can reach out to me through 3ventures.com.
You're on X, formerly Twitter. You're on LinkedIn, 3ventures.com/about has got you on there as well. Anything else? People can get a hold of you. They can go to our website. Don't say your email on here.
Yeah, so we'll be good. But that's sort of the introduction to solving attribution at lead generation organizations. I know we got a couple more episodes planned out here to talk about some of the specifics and also specific platforms. That's going to be a lot more in the weeds and in the details getting into those. But other than that, thank you very much.
Yeah.